They say revenge is a dish best served cold. After 23 years of marriage, I discover my wife selling my military drone designs to our enemies while sleeping with her designer. But they made one fatal error, underestimating the former special ops soldier they betrayed. The 3 sentences I spoke at dinner changed everything. By the second one, my wife's face turned ghost white. My name is Gavin Harding. I'm 49 years old and the founder of Apex Drone Systems, a company that specializes in cutting-edge unmanned aircraft for everything from military reconnaissance to disaster relief operations. 22 years ago, I built this company from nothing but my garage and an idea that drones could save lives instead of just taking them. Now we have government contracts worth millions, a sprawling headquarters in Virginia, and technology that our competitors would kill for. Literally, as it turns out. I met Cynthia during my final year in the Air Force when I was testing early drone prototypes. She was working in the administrative office, all auburn hair, an ambitious smile. We married 6 months later. She loved the idea of being with someone who was going places, building something revolutionary. Our children came soon after: Connor, who followed my interest in military service, and Cassidy, who inherited her mother's social grace and my stubborn determination. For years, I thought we were the perfect American success story. The veteran who built an empire. The beautiful wife who organized charity galas for wounded warriors. The son at West Point making us proud. The daughter at an elite university with a bright future ahead. The 5-bedroom house in Fairfax County with a view of the Potomac. I never realized how hollow it all was until the moment everything collapsed. That morning started like any other. I returned early from a business trip to San Diego, where we were demonstrating our new search and rescue model to the Coast Guard. My flight landed at dawn, and I decided to surprise Cynthia rather than calling for a car. 23 years of marriage deserve spontaneous moments, right? I entered our bedroom quietly, expecting to find her asleep. Instead, she was sitting up in bed, phone pressed to her ear, laughing softly. Not the laugh she used at fundraisers or family dinners. This was different, intimate, youthful, alive in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "He won't be back until tomorrow afternoon," she was saying, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We'll have plenty of time to finish what we started." When she saw me standing in the doorway, suitcase still in hand, the phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Her face transformed instantly. Surprise, then fear, then a practiced smile. "Gavin, you're home early," she exclaimed, ending the call without even saying goodbye. "You should have called. Thought I'd surprise you." I replied, watching her carefully. "Who was that?" "Just Melissa about the charity auction planning," she said smoothly. Too smoothly. "Nothing that can't wait." I nodded and set down my suitcase, pretending to accept her explanation. But something had shifted inside me, like the subtle calibration adjustment that can change a drone's entire flight path. I didn't confront her then. Instead, I began to observe, to gather intelligence, just as my military training had taught me. What I discovered over the next few weeks would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. I've faced gunfire in Afghanistan. I've navigated drones through hostile airspace. But nothing prepared me for the warfare happening under my own roof. 3 weeks after overhearing Cynthia's phone call, I had enough evidence to court-martial my entire family. Rather than confronting her immediately, I called an old Air Force buddy, Mike Ransom, who now ran a private security firm. "Need surveillance on my own house," I told him, hating every word. Mike didn't ask questions. That's why we remained friends after 20 years. Within days, he delivered what I needed. Photos of a man entering my home when I was supposedly in Washington. Security footage of Cynthia kissing him in our kitchen. And most devastating, images of my daughter Cassidy welcoming this stranger with a friendly hug. His name was Nolan Winters, an interior design consultant who specialized in getting close to wealthy women. According to Mike's background check, he had a pattern of relationships with married executives' wives, always ending with mysterious financial windfalls. What I didn't expect was the industrial espionage angle. One photo showed Nolan in my home office, photographing technical documents for our newest military drone prototype, the Peregrine, capable of undetectable high-altitude surveillance. The program worth billions to our government and, apparently, to our competitors. The annual charity gala for veterans was that evening. I arrived alone, Cynthia having gone ahead to help with arrangements. The ballroom of the Westmoreland Country Club was elegantly decorated, filled with defense contractors, military officers, and political figures who controlled our contracts. I spotted Cynthia immediately, radiant in a blue gown, standing too close to a tall man with carefully styled hair. Nolan Winters, looking completely at ease among the elite crowd. Gavin. Cynthia's surprise seemed genuine when I approached. I thought you were still at the Pentagon meeting. It ended early, I replied calmly. You must be Nolan. Mr. Harding. His handshake was firm, his smile rehearsed. Your wife has impeccable taste. In some things, I agreed, holding his gaze until he looked away. Cassidy arrived moments later with her boyfriend Tyler, whose father happened to run our biggest competitor, Defender Dynamics. Another puzzle piece clicked into place. During dinner, I observed them all. Cassidy's nervous glances, Cynthia's practiced charm, the subtle signals between my wife and her lover. When we returned home that night, everything came to a head during a nightcap in the kitchen. You're nothing, Cynthia sneered after one too many glasses of champagne. Just a boring drone guy who funds our lifestyle. Honestly, Dad, Cassidy added with surprising cruelty, we forget you exist half the time. You're never really here anyway. I set down my glass, tapping it against the granite countertop to get their attention. I'll keep this brief. Just 3 sentences, I said calmly. I know about Nolan Winters. I have evidence of the industrial espionage. The FBI will be here tomorrow morning. By the second sentence, Cynthia's face had turned ghost white, her champagne glass frozen midway to her lips. The next morning, black SUVs with federal plates lined my driveway. Special Agent Diana Forrester led the FBI team, her no-nonsense demeanor matching my military background. Connor had arrived home from West Point on emergency leave, standing tall beside me as we watched the agents enter our home. Is it true, Dad? Connor asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. Every word, I replied, showing him selected photos from Mike's surveillance. Your mother and sister betrayed, not just me, but potentially national security. Upstairs, Cynthia and Cassidy were interviewed separately. I could hear Cassidy's tearful protest through the walls. I didn't know about any documents. I thought it was just an affair. Agent Forrester approached me after the initial sweep. Mr. Harding, we verified your claims. Mr. Winters was apprehended at Dulles Airport this morning with classified drone schematics. He's singing like a canary, claiming your wife approached him, not the other way around. And my daughter's involvement, limited to facilitating the affair, not the espionage, based on preliminary evidence. Though her boyfriend Tyler Davenport may have deeper connections. I nodded, a small relief amid the devastation. At least Cassidy's betrayal had limits. By noon, Nolan and Tyler's father Richard Davenport were in custody. Cynthia and Cassidy remained at home, shell-shocked and under surveillance. That night, I sat with Connor in my study, bourbon in hand despite the early hour. What happens now? He asked. Justice, I replied simply. For the betrayal of our family and our country. Connor studied my face. And Mom? Cassidy, your mother made her choices, I said, my voice hardening. She'll face legal consequences for the espionage charges, though I've arranged for certain considerations if she cooperates fully. And my sister? I sighed, looking at a family photo that now seemed like fiction. That depends on her choices from this point forward. Later, I found Cynthia alone in our bedroom, frantically packing a bag. Going somewhere, I asked from the doorway. She whirled around, mascara streaking her face. Gavin, please. You have to believe me. Nolan manipulated me. I didn't understand what those documents meant. Save it for your lawyer, I said coldly. Every step of your affair and espionage is documented, time-stamped, and verified. You knew exactly what you were doing. 23 years of marriage has to count for something, she pleaded. It counted for nothing when you betrayed me, I replied. Why should it matter now? As I turned to leave, Cynthia called out one last desperate question. What about Cassidy? I stopped, but didn't turn around. She chose her side. Now she lives with the consequences. 2 weeks after the arrests, I disappeared. Not literally. I wasn't on some beach sipping my ties. I simply withdrew from the life I'd built, leaving Cynthia and Cassidy to face the wreckage alone. I moved to a company apartment near Langley, transferred operational control of Apex to my VP of Operations, and focused on cooperating with federal investigators. Connor returned to West Point with my blessing, his loyalty assured. The media pounced on the story. Defense contractor's wife arrested for espionage. Cynthia's society friends vanished overnight. The charity board demanded her resignation. She called daily, her messages increasingly desperate as she faced both criminal charges and social extinction. Cassidy was suspended from university, pending the investigation. Her sorority sisters and Instagram followers abandoned her. Tyler's cooperation with authorities against his father meant he'd turned against her too. My daughter was learning the harsh lesson that betrayal leaves you utterly alone. Meanwhile, I wasn't idle. Mike and I methodically documented every aspect of Cynthia's betrayal. We traced the offshore accounts where she'd been funneling money, untangled her web of lies, and built an airtight case that ensured she couldn't claim ignorance. One night, I received a call from an unknown number. "Dad." Cassidy's voice was small, broken. "Can we talk?" "We're talking now," I replied, unmoved. "I've made a horrible mistake," she whispered. "I didn't know about the espionage. I swear. Mom told me you were distant because you were having affairs during your business trips. I believed her, and that justified betraying me, helping destroy our family." "No," she admitted through tears. "Nothing justifies what I did. I was stupid and selfish." "Yes, you were." "Dad, please. I've lost everything. My friends, my reputation, my future. Isn't that punishment enough?" I considered her words, remembering the little girl who once thought I hung the moon. "No," I finally answered. "It's merely the beginning." "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You made your choice, Cassidy. Now you live with it." After hanging up, I stared at a family photo on my desk. The smiling faces now seemed like strangers. The military trains you to analyze threats and eliminate them with precision. I never imagined applying those skills to my own family, but here we were. Justice would be served, cold and complete. Cynthia would face prison time for espionage. Cassidy would learn that actions have consequences. And I would rebuild, stronger and more focused than before. Some men might choose forgiveness. I chose justice instead. 3 months after disappearing from Cynthia's radar, I resurfaced at Apex Drone Systems headquarters. I walked into the executive boardroom, where the company directors had gathered for an emergency meeting about the espionage scandal. "Gentlemen," I greeted them calmly, taking my seat at the head of the table. "I believe you were discussing my company." The stunned silence was broken by Board Chairman Wilson. "Gavin, where have you been?" "There's been chaos. I've been working with federal prosecutors," I interrupted, "building an airtight case while monitoring our stock price, customer confidence, and your various reactions to the crisis." I opened a leather portfolio and slid documents across the table. "This restructuring plan takes effect immediately. Those who stood by the company during this crisis will be rewarded. Those who didn't," I smiled thinly. "The severance packages are generous." By evening, 3 board members had been removed, replaced by loyal executives who had proven their worth during the crisis. Our stock price surged on news of my return and the Pentagon's renewed confidence in our security protocols. Meanwhile, Cynthia received divorce papers and a settlement offer from my lawyers. She could keep the house, but little else. No alimony, minimal assets, and a requirement to cooperate fully with prosecutors. "This is insulting," she told her attorney during a meeting I had secretly recorded. "After 23 years, I'm entitled to half of everything." "Mrs. Harding," her lawyer replied nervously, "given the circumstances and pending criminal charges, this is actually quite generous. Mr. Harding has indicated he's willing to testify on your behalf if you accept these terms." "Testify about what?" "That you were manipulated by Nolan Winters, that you didn't fully understand the implications of the documents you provided." "He wants me to plead ignorance," Cynthia realized bitterly. "To paint myself as a stupid, gullible woman. It would significantly reduce your potential sentence," her lawyer pointed out. "Otherwise, you're looking at 15 to 20 years. That evening, I met Mike at a secure location to review our progress. "Cynthia's backed into a corner," he reported. "The offshore accounts we traced to her and Winters contain nearly $3 million of your money. That's grand theft on top of espionage." "And Cassidy, working as a barista near Georgetown. Her trust funds frozen, pending the investigation. Mike hesitated. She's been writing you letters. Weekly. I nodded, unsurprised. Forward them to my secure email. I'll read them when I'm ready. She seems genuinely remorseful, Gavin. Remorse comes easy when you're caught, I replied, remembering her cruel words about forgetting I existed. Learning from mistakes is harder. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I reflected on the pieces moving across my strategic board. Every step of my counterattack had been calculated for maximum impact. Cynthia and her lover were cornered. The company was secure. My son remained loyal. Only one piece remained uncertain: my daughter. Whether she would become collateral damage or find redemption was still unclear. The federal courthouse buzzed with media as Cynthia entered for her plea hearing. She looked diminished in her conservative suit, her once perfect appearance now strained. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, unable to face what she destroyed. Judge Montgomery called the court to order. Mrs. Harding, I understand you wish to change your plea? Yes, Your Honor, her attorney responded. My client wishes to plead guilty to lesser charges of conspiracy and unauthorized disclosure of classified information. The prosecutor stood. The government accepts this plea, given Mrs. Harding's cooperation and Mr. Harding's statement regarding his wife's limited understanding of the documents provided to Mr. Winters. I watched him passively from the gallery. The lie that Cynthia hadn't understood the value of what she stole would reduce her sentence, but it would also cement her reputation as a foolish, manipulated woman, a narrative far more damaging to her pride than any prison term. Her sentence: 3 years in federal prison, forfeiture of assets related to the crimes, and acceptance of my divorce terms. As guards prepared to take her into custody, we were allowed a brief moment together. So this is your victory, she said quietly. You've reduced me to nothing. You did that yourself, I replied. I merely ensured there were consequences. Will you ever forgive me? She asked, a flicker of our past visible in her eyes. No, I said simply. Some betrayals are final. As Cynthia was led away, Connor approached, standing tall in his West Point uniform. He'd received weekend leave to attend the hearing. It's over, Dad, he said, his voice steady. This part is, I agreed. Focus on your studies, son. I've spoken with your commanding officer. This situation won't affect your career prospects. We walked together toward the exit when a familiar voice called out. Dad, wait. Cassidy stood by the courthouse doors, thinner than I remembered, her designer clothes replaced by simple attire that reflected her new financial reality. May I talk to you? She asked, eyes downcast. Connor squeezed my shoulder. I'll give you two some privacy. As he walked away, Cassidy spoke quickly. I've been writing you letters. Did you get them? Yes. And words are easy, Cassidy. Actions matter. She nodded, tears threatening. I've been working at this coffee shop, taking business classes at night. I could have called Grandma for money, but I didn't. I'm trying to stand on my own. I studied her, seeing glimpses of the daughter I'd raised. Why did you side with your mother? Because she convinced me you didn't care about us, Cassidy admitted. That your work was more important than your family. I believed her because... She hesitated. Because I was distant, I finished for her. She nodded, finally meeting my eyes. I was wrong. So wrong about everything. I checked my watch, unmoved by her tears. I have a meeting. Connor, I'll call you next week. As I walked away, leaving her standing alone, the unspoken message was clear. Her brother was forgiven. She was not. 1 year to the day after the fateful dinner that exposed Cynthia's betrayal, I returned to the family mansion. The property had remained empty since her imprisonment, maintained by a skeleton staff but devoid of life. As my SUV pulled into the circular driveway, lights blazed from every window. Inside, Rosa, our longtime housekeeper, supervised the team preparing an elaborate dinner. Perfect timing, Mr. Harding, she greeted me. Everything is ready, just as you requested. I nodded, surveying the familiar space now transformed. I'd had the interior completely redecorated, erasing any trace of Cynthia's presence. Family photos were replaced with military memorabilia and aerospace art. The master suite had been gutted and rebuilt to my specifications. I showered and changed into a tailored suit, then removed a sealed envelope from my briefcase. Inside was information that would complete my strategic maneuver against those who had betrayed me. At precisely 7, The doorbell rang. Connor arrived first, looking sharp in his dress uniform, now bearing the insignia of a second lieutenant after his West Point graduation. "The place looks different," he observed, noting the changes. "Necessary renovations," I replied. The doorbell rang again. Cassidy stood nervously on the threshold, more composed than at the courthouse but still tentative. Behind her waited several high-ranking Pentagon officials, congressional representatives, and Senator Martha Reynolds, the elegant former prosecutor who had been my companion at several recent Washington functions. I'd invited them all to witness the final act of my carefully orchestrated plan. After dinner, I stood to address my guests. "Thank you for coming tonight. 1 year ago, my life changed dramatically. Tonight marks a new beginning." I raised my glass. "Secretary Matthews has asked me to head a newly formed division at the Pentagon focusing on drone defense systems integration. I've accepted." Applause broke out around the table. I gestured to Connor. "My son will be joining the program after completing his specialized training." Connor straightened, pride evident in his bearing. This appointment would accelerate his military career significantly. "There's one piece of unfinished business," I continued, opening the sealed envelope. "These intelligence photos confirm what we suspected but couldn't prove during the trial. Nolan Winters wasn't just a corporate spy. He was working directly for foreign military interests." Gasps circulated as I distributed the photos, showing Winters meeting with known foreign operatives. Secretary Matthews examined them closely. "This changes the national security implications significantly," he noted. As discussions turned to technical matters of drone security, Cassidy sat silently, absorbing the final confirmation of her mother's betrayal, not just of her father and marriage, but potentially of her country. Later, as guests departed, Cassidy approached me on the terrace. "You knew about the foreign connection during Mom's trial, didn't you?" she asked. "Yes. Why hold it back until now?" "Strategic timing," I replied. "Cynthia is seeking early release on medical grounds. These photos ensure that won't happen." Cassidy nodded slowly. "You're making sure she serves every day of her sentence." "Actions have consequences," I said simply. "And me?" she asked quietly. "Have I served my sentence?" I studied her for the first time, without anger clouding my judgment. The entitled princess was gone, replaced by someone who had learned hard lessons. "That depends," I finally said, "on what you've learned." 6 months after the dinner party at the mansion, I received an urgent call from the federal prison where Cynthia was serving her sentence. "Mr. Harding, there's been an incident," the warden explained. "Your ex-wife attempted suicide. She's stable, but the prison psychologist is concerned." "Is there a security risk?" I asked clinically. "No, sir. But she's been writing letters mentioning someone called the Handler, possibly her foreign contact. We flagged it for counterintelligence. Send me copies immediately." Within hours, I was examining scans of Cynthia's letters. Her once elegant handwriting had become erratic, the content alternating between remorse and cryptic warnings. "The Handler promised we would be protected. Bennett doesn't know the real reason behind everything. I did it for us, Gavin. You were getting too close to what they were hiding in Project Peregrine." Project Peregrine. 3 years earlier, I discovered anomalies in our classified drone development. Unexplained design modifications that appeared in final builds, but not in my original specs. My investigation had mysteriously stalled right around when Cynthia's affair began. While contemplating this, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Cassidy. She entered my Pentagon office tentatively. After our conversation at the mansion, I'd allowed limited contact, watching carefully to see if her changed behavior was genuine. "Mom tried to kill herself," she said without preamble. I was informed. "She's been writing me strange letters about someone called the Handler." I thought it was prison paranoia until the FBI contacted me this morning. She placed a stack of envelopes on my desk. "These are all her letters. I think you should read them." As I reviewed them, a disturbing pattern emerged. Cynthia had been dropping breadcrumbs about a larger conspiracy, suggesting her betrayal had been partly coerced to derail my investigation into security breaches in the Peregrine program. "Did you know what these references meant?" I asked Cassidy. "No, I thought she was delusional. But after her suicide attempt, I started wondering if there was more to the story." I leaned back, reassessing the strategic board. "Why bring this to me now?" "Because whatever the Handler is, Mom is terrified. She believes he'll silence her in prison. Cassidy met my eyes directly. And if that's true, she betrayed you for reasons more complicated than we thought. That doesn't excuse her choices, I said coldly. Or yours. No, Cassidy agreed. But it might explain them. After she left, I called Mike Ransom. I need you to reopen the Peregrine security breach file and arrange enhanced protection for Cynthia at the federal facility. Discreetly. The Peregrine file. Mike sounded surprised. That's ancient history. Maybe not, I replied. Someone may have orchestrated Cynthia's betrayal to stop my investigation. If so, they made a critical error. What's that? They underestimated who they were dealing with. For the first time in years, I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline from my special operations days. If someone had manipulated my family's destruction as a smokescreen, they were about to learn a painful lesson about picking the wrong target. 6 months of intense investigation revealed the truth behind the handler. Malcolm Vega, former intelligence operative turned private contractor for a consortium of defense companies. His specialty, compromising individuals with access to classified technology through elaborate personal entrapments. The evidence was damning. Vega had targeted Cynthia as part of a coordinated effort to derail my investigation into security breaches at Apex. Nolan Winters and Tyler Davenport were merely pawns in a larger game. But Vega had made a critical error by underestimating me. Using techniques from my special operations days, I methodically tracked his movements, communications, and finances until I had built an airtight case. Unexpected intelligence came from an unlikely source, Senator Martha Reynolds, who had been growing closer to me over recent months. There's something you should know, she said during a private dinner at her Georgetown home. I have access to classified oversight records that confirm your suspicions about Project Peregrine. The termination order for your investigation 3 years ago came from unusual channels. Her offer to help access these records triggered my final suspicion. Martha's pursuit of our relationship had begun immediately after Cynthia's arrest. She had shown unusual interest in all aspects of the Peregrine investigation. Working with Mike Ransom, I set a trap. During a dinner party in my home, I deliberately revealed false classified findings about Peregrine while Martha was present. When she excused herself to use the restroom, hidden cameras caught her photographing documents and transmitting them via an encrypted channel. It's her, Mike confirmed, monitoring the transmission. She's Vega's partner. The next evening, federal agents arrested Vega, Martha, and 3 associates at a secure facility in Alexandria. My phone call had triggered the raid during their meeting to discuss the false Peregrine information. We've been tracking your family for 3 years, Vega confessed during interrogation. Your wife was initially reluctant, but once compromised, she committed fully to the betrayal. After the arrests, I visited Cynthia in prison for the first time. She looked broken, yet somehow relieved. You found a handler, she said. I knew you would eventually. Not just found, I replied. Dismantled his entire operation. Does this change anything between us? She asked hesitantly. I studied her, seeing beyond my anger for the first time. No, I finally said. Understanding the manipulation doesn't erase the choices you made afterward. As I left the prison, I recognized that the final chapter of this betrayal was closing. The puppet master who had helped orchestrate my family's destruction would face justice, but some wounds would never fully heal. 1 month after Vega's arrest, I stood with Connor and Cassidy on the deck of my new Chesapeake Bay home. The sprawling property, far from our old mansion's painful memories, represented my fresh start. The Pentagon's expanded the Peregrine program, Connor reported. With the security breach contained, they've authorized full deployment. I nodded, surveying the water. And your new assignment, Cybersecurity Division at Fort Meade. I start next month. Pride swelled in my chest. My son had forged his own path while remaining loyal through our family's darkest days. Cassidy stood quietly nearby. Over recent months, as we worked together on Vega's case, a cautious truce had formed between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. I've been accepted to Georgetown Law, she said, focusing on national security. You'll excel there, I acknowledged. Her experiences had hardened her, but also focused her natural intelligence. Dad, about Mom. She began hesitantly. The court is reviewing her case, I interrupted. Her cooperation against Vega may reduce her sentence. Will you ever forgive her? Cassidy asked. I considered this carefully. Forgiveness isn't relevant. What matters is moving forward with clarity about the past. Later, alone, I reflected on the journey of the past 3 years. I had lost a wife, nearly lost a daughter, and exposed traitors at the highest levels. I'd been betrayed, manipulated, and targeted. Throughout it all, I'd remained true to my core principles: loyalty, accountability, and justice. The man who had tapped his fork against his glass that fateful night had transformed completely. I had not merely survived betrayal. I had transcended it, becoming stronger and more formidable. On my desk sat a photograph of Connor in his uniform and Cassidy at her college graduation. Beside it lay the divorce papers from Cynthia and a letter expressing her remorse. There was also a dossier on a new drone defense system I was developing, one that would save more lives than my enemies had ever threatened. Some men choose forgiveness. I had chosen justice instead. But as I watched the sunset over the Chesapeake, I recognized that the next chapter would be defined by neither. It would be defined by creation, by building something new from the lessons of destruction. This is how a man rises from betrayal, not by forgetting, but by transforming.